The screen fades in with the flicker of a dim oil lamp. The sound of a ticking clock echoes in the silence. A small boy, frail and restless, sits by a window in Milan, Ohio, staring into the night sky as if searching for answers that no book around him could provide. This boy was Thomas Alva Edison, a child destined to light up the world, yet born into darkness. In 1847, no one could have imagined that this sickly, nearly deaf boy, often mocked by neighbors, would one day revolutionize human life itself. His story didn't begin with brilliance. It began with rejection, confusion, and countless failures before success. Edison was the youngest of 7 children. His father, Samuel Edison, had tried and failed in many businesses, forcing the family to live a modest and unstable life. His mother, Nancy, was a former teacher, a woman of strong will who became his guiding star. But Edison was not the kind of child schools embraced. Restless, curious, and constantly distracted, he asked questions no teacher had the patience to answer. At the age of just 7, his schoolmaster labeled him addled, meaning slow and incapable. Humiliated, Edison returned home with tears in his eyes. That single word could have destroyed him, but Nancy refused to let it. She pulled him out of school and took charge of his education herself, teaching him to read, to question, and most importantly, to never stop experimenting. Life wasn't kind to the young boy. He suffered from scarlet fever at a young age, which left him with partial hearing loss. Imagine a child standing at the back of a classroom, straining to hear every word, yet catching only fragments. To the world, it was a weakness. To Edison, it became a strange kind of strength. My deafness, he would later say, was a blessing in disguise. It shut out distractions and let me concentrate. But survival meant work. At the age of 12, Edison became a newsboy on the Grand Trunk Railroad, selling newspapers and candy to passengers. He wasn't just a seller, he was an entrepreneur. He printed his own newspaper, the Grand Trunk Herald, making him the first person in the world to publish a newspaper on a moving train. Yet even here, fate tested him. One careless experiment with chemicals inside the baggage car led to an explosion, costing him his makeshift laboratory and further damaging his hearing when the conductor struck him in anger. Still, Edison did not give up. Where others saw failure, he saw lessons. Where others heard silence, he heard possibility. Every night, as the train roared through the darkness, Edison scribbled ideas by candlelight, his hands stained with ink, his eyes burning with curiosity. He was not the genius history celebrates, not yet. He was a boy fighting against poverty, illness, and ridicule, armed with nothing but questions that no one else dared to ask. And it was in those lonely nights of struggle that the seeds of his greatness began to grow. The year was 1862. The Civil War had engulfed America, but far from the battlefield. On the wooden platforms of the Grand Trunk Railroad, a single act of kindness changed Thomas Edison's destiny forever. One summer afternoon, as the sun blazed on the tracks, Edison noticed a small boy wandering dangerously close to an oncoming train. Without hesitation, he dropped everything, lunged forward, and pulled the child to safety. That boy was the son of J.U. Mackenzie, the station agent, grateful beyond words. Mackenzie offered Edison something far more valuable than money. He taught him how to operate the telegraph. For Edison, it was like opening a door into another universe. The telegraph was the beating heart of communication in the 19th century, and Edison threw himself into mastering it. Night after night, his fingers tapped against the brass key, sending codes across wires that hummed like veins, carrying the lifeblood of a new era. By the time he was 16, he had become a skilled telegraph operator, traveling from city to city, working odd jobs, and constantly learning. But Edison was never content with simply operating machines. He wanted to improve them. His restless curiosity turned every workplace into a laboratory. Still, life tested him harshly. In 1867, while working the night shift in Louisville, Kentucky, Edison was experimenting with batteries when he spilled sulfuric acid that burned through the floorboards and dripped onto his boss's desk below. He was immediately fired. Homeless, nearly penniless, and rejected yet again, Edison wandered the streets wondering if he had lost his path. But instead of breaking, he grew hungrier. He moved to Boston in 1868, carrying nothing but determination and a handful of ideas. Boston, buzzing with intellectual energy, exposed him to great scientists and inventors. There, he filed his first patent for an electric vote recorder device ahead of its time. Legislators dismissed it as unnecessary. But Edison took an oath that would define the rest of his career. "I will never invent anything that people don't want." From that point on, Edison's failures became his teachers. He worked tirelessly, saving scraps of metal and parts to create prototypes. He often went hungry, sometimes sleeping in rented workshops, but he was relentless. Every failure pushed him closer to a breakthrough, and every dismissal only hardened his resolve. Slowly, whispers of his unusual genius began to spread. Here was a young man, deaf, broke, and often ridiculed, yet filled with a fire that refused to burn out. This was the turning point, the moment. Edison transformed from a wandering newsboy into an inventor with purpose. He was no longer searching for direction. He had found it. The path was not easy, but with every telegraph key he tapped and every experiment that exploded, Edison was moving closer to lighting up the world. The late 1870s, an era of smoke, steel, and restless ambition. America was surging into modernity, but it was still trapped in darkness after sundown. Gas lamps flickered dimly in the streets, candles burned out in homes, and the world waited for someone bold enough to replace the night with day. That man was Thomas Edison. By now, Edison had left Boston for Menlo Park, New Jersey, where he established what history remembers as the world's first true research laboratory. It wasn't just a workshop, it was a factory of ideas. The air inside was thick with the smell of burning metal. Assistants rushed back and forth, while Edison himself worked like a man, possessed, sometimes going 3 or 4 nights without sleep. His philosophy was clear. Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, and he lived it. In 1877, Edison introduced the phonograph, a device that captured sound and played it back. When his own voice echoed back from the horn for the first time, even he was stunned. Newspapers called him the Wizard of Menlo Park. But this was only the beginning. Edison had a vision far greater than sound. He wanted to conquer light itself. The challenge was enormous. Scientists across the world had tried and failed to create a practical electric light. Their bulbs burned too quickly, too hot, or were far too expensive. Yet Edison refused to accept defeat. In 1879, after more than 1,000 failed experiments, his team finally produced a bulb with a carbon filament that could glow for over 40 hours. As the filament lit up the lab in a warm golden glow, Edison smiled and whispered, "We will make the darkness disappear." The invention changed everything. But Edison didn't stop there. He knew that a single bulb meant nothing without a system to deliver power. So he designed entire electrical networks, generators, switches, wiring that would bring light into every home and business. In 1882, New York City's Pearl Street became the first neighborhood in the world illuminated by Edison's electric power station. For the first time, night itself had been defeated. Edison became a global icon. Investors flocked to him, newspapers hailed him as the greatest inventor alive, and ordinary families stood in awe as they switched on electric lights in their homes. Yet beneath the glory, he remained the restless boy who once scribbled ideas by candlelight. He worked obsessively, often covered in soot, ink, and sweat, as though afraid that if he ever stopped, the light might fade. Thomas Edison had risen from a rejected, nearly deaf child to the man who gave humanity the power to banish darkness. And still, his journey was not complete. For Edison, success was not a destination. It was a race without a finish line. By the dawn of the 20th century, Thomas Edison was no longer just a man, he was an institution. He held over 1,000 patents, more than any inventor before him. His creations shaped modern life. The phonograph gave us recorded sound. The electric light gave us nights that never ended. And the motion picture camera gave us cinema, new art form that still defines culture today. Cities glowed because of him. Industries expanded because of him. And the rhythm of human life itself changed because of him. Edison had, in many ways, reinvented civilization. Yet behind the triumphs was a man who never stopped working. Even in his 60s, Edison could be found in his labs at West Orange, New Jersey, his white hair wild, his hands blackened with soot. Still experimenting late into the night, he was relentless, almost obsessive, believing that every problem had a solution, if only one had the courage to keep trying. To him, failure was never the end. It was simply the 10,000 ways that don't work. Edison's legacy wasn't just in the machines he built, But in the mindset he left behind, he taught the world that greatness is not reserved for the naturally gifted, but earned through persistence, grit, and the refusal to give up. He showed that a nearly deaf boy, dismissed as addled, could one day transform humanity if he dared to dream and endure. His story became the ultimate symbol of turning failure into success. On October 18, 1931, at the age of 84, Edison passed away. When the news spread, America dimmed its electric lights for a moment of silence. An extraordinary tribute to the man who had given light to the world. Cities across the globe honored him, newspapers mourned him, and millions reflected on a life that had burned brighter than any filament. Even today, every time a switch clicks and a room glows, every time music plays from a speaker, or every time a movie plays on screen, Edison's fingerprints are there. His inventions became the invisible threads woven into our daily lives. More than a century later, his light has not gone out. The lesson of Thomas Edison's life is simple yet profound. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the path to it. He proved that perseverance can turn rejection into revolution. Edison once said, "Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time." And perhaps that is the light he truly left behind, the belief that even in the darkest hour, if you keep going, you can create a dawn.